Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. So, a gentleman that I really admire and have looked up to over the years, followed his career as lots of us have, is Rocco Rossi. And he just recently announced a new gig that he's president and CEO of something called Shift 25. And as the process of going there, he's also done some things that I really want to do. He's taken a trek across northern Spain, I think for the second or third time. You know, Rocco, you're just inspirational as to setting your objective for your passion in life and trying to make a change in the world, and then also taking care of yourself as you go through it, and worrying about self-care and spiritualism and inspiration. So I think it's wonderful to check in with you. So how are you, and what the heck is Shift 25?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on and for the kind introduction. Brian. And in terms of the self-care to make stuff happen, for me, I'm always reminded of that wonderful announcement at the beginning of every flight, which is, in case of decompression, masks will fall from the ceiling. Make sure you put it on yourself first before you try to help anyone. And I'm an enormous believer, and I came to it after years of not being a believer, that unless you take care of yourself physically, spiritually, it's really hard to help other people and to live up to your full potential in life.
Yeah. So tell us about this trip then. How did you take care of yourself?
Well, many years ago, and it's not two or three, I've now done 18 variations of a series of medieval pilgrimage routes through Western Europe that are called the Camino de Santiago. They are all trails that end up in a northwestern town of Spain called Santiago de Compostela, where underneath the major cathedral, legend tells us that the remains of St. James, the Greater Apostle of Christ, are buried. And so for over 1,000 years, pilgrims from across Europe and around the world have walked or ridden a horse, and in more modern times cycled to this. And I love backpacking and staying in monasteries and church basements and albergues and meeting people and seeing spectacular sunrises, sunsets, eating great food, feeling your body, re-energizing your body through exercise. I mean, there is nothing more tasty than having a meal when you're actually hungry, and not just because it's the dinner time or lunchtime, but because you've just walked 25 or 30 kilometers and all is well with the world.
Fantastic. And is it a spiritual thing as well that you're out, seeing these churches, etc.?
Absolutely. I mean, it's not just the churches, it's nature itself, and it's an opportunity to do a kind of a walking meditation. And however you define divinity or thinking of things beyond ourselves, the Camino gives you the time and space to allow yourself to have those conversations and to come to the understanding that being alone is not the same thing as being lonely. And it's a real opportunity to re-energize, recharge the batteries, and think through issues and questions and priorities that you're wrestling with in the day-to-day life, which it's so hard for us to get to because there's always another meeting to go, a call to respond to, etc.
And so you do these treks on your own. You don't do it with other people?
I typically start on my own. I've done it once with my son, and you certainly meet people along the way, but no two people walk 20, 25, 30 kilometers step for step in exactly the same way, wanting to stop in the same places. And for me, I love ending up at a place where I can talk to people at the end of the day, but during the day, that's my gift to myself.
What a fantastic experience. It sounds incredible. And so did you decide to take this new gig on the walk or before you went on the walk?
The opportunity had raised itself before the walk, so I was absolutely thinking about it. And then, the founders of this wonderful group of individuals who are really committed to ensuring that Canada gets better and better every day, and that the success that they've had in life is not simply happenstance, but is something that should and could be available to everyone going forward. And they, like me, share this real disappointment that we have seemingly fallen into this conversation of us and them, and demonization, and zero sum, and just focus on redistribution, when we think the real potential is, how do we continue to grow? How do we build a more ambitious, more innovative, more entrepreneurial, more competitive Canada that in turn allows us to continue to invest and build out the kind of social network and life opportunities that we want for ourselves, for our children, for our neighbors, that make Canada such a beacon, and that lead to millions of people around the world wanting to come here. And increasingly, newcomers, along with our young people, are feeling that those same opportunities and that dream they thought that they were sold on, that they came to Canada for, or that they've heard from their parents that they're here born in Canada, and they're feeling like maybe that future is not available to them, and that would be a horrible thing, and that would be something that we need to fix.
I want to know more about Shift 25 and exactly what it is, but I got to tell you, what you're saying really resonates with me. I was chatting with someone the other day who I think really aptly described it as, our youth today are walking in cement, and what we've got is a situation where they are faced with debt that is at an unsustainably high level, higher than it's ever been before, both frankly government as well as personal debt. That our taxes are incredibly high. That affordability, whether it be regular affordability, everything in life, or it's just housing affordability, is not there. It's inaffordable. That we're faced with climate change. We're faced with wars in Eastern Europe and wars in the Middle East, and they're being told that AI is going to take away all their jobs, and they've just come through either 4 years in high school or in university where they didn't have the social life that all of us had. They didn't make the connections. They didn't get the networking. They didn't get the mentors because they were, doing high school without sports and school clubs and interactions, or they were doing university from Zoom rather than from residence. I think that we've really given our young people a challenge, a big challenge. And I don't think we appreciate it. And it's our fault, because we were the ones that gave them that life, that gave them that world, gave them that debt, gave them that inaffordability, gave them all that situation. So if your organization is going to do something about that, congratulations and good luck and Godspeed.
Well, look, it's not my organization, not my movement that's going to do it. It's all of us together, because this is really the challenge of our lifetime, the challenge for our generation and for the next generation. And again, this is a country that is supremely endowed, incredible natural resources, a relatively small population in this massive country next to the most dynamic economy in the world. We have more free trade agreements than any other country on earth. So we've got that opportunity. We've got phenomenal universities, colleges. We're growing. We continue to be a beacon. So with all of those ingredients, what's the recipe to ensure that we bake the absolute best cake? And Shift 25 is an attempt to contribute to that. I encourage people to go to shift25.ca to learn more, but when you break it down to the basics, it's how do we, when Canada decided it wanted to do better in the Olympics, there was this huge campaign around how do we own the podium, right? And how do we focus on victory? Because yes, it's a great thing and it's wonderful to get ribbons for participation. But there are real life consequences to just participating in the economy and not being competitive vis-a-vis our other countries in the global market. You have a diminishing set of opportunities. You have, as we've been seeing, unfortunately, in the last several years, a GDP per capita that's actually been flat and then declining.
For 15 years, no increase in real disposable income.
Yeah, and what does that mean? What does that mean, and where do we see that difference? So, for instance, and not to go too much into the numbers, but just as one example, Ontario generates about $60,000 per capita in GDP each and every year, which is quite strong relative to the balance of Canada. As a comparison, Quebec, the number is 54,000 per capita per year. But when we compare ourselves, this dynamic engine of the Canadian economy, to the 8 US states that border the Great Lakes, from New York to Minnesota, the average GDP per capita of those 8 states is $20,000 more per man, woman, and child each and every year. And in simple terms, with a population of 15 to 16 million here in Ontario, that means we're looking at $300 to $320 billion in economic activity this year, next year, the year after, just to get to average. So surely, with all of the brilliant people we have, with all of the resources we have, if we simply pushed ourselves to dream bigger, to focus on innovation, to celebrate entrepreneurship, to celebrate that ability to grow businesses, instead of seeing business as a problem or a demon to attack, but as something to, yes, regulation is important, but the key is how do we dream bigger to deliver on those dreams that our parents, our grandparents had when they immigrated to this country, and that they were able to fulfill in no small part for many of themselves and their families. And as you say, that we owe that same sense of leaving the place better and with greater opportunities for our young people.
How do we dream bigger? That's a pretty good, deep question.
Yeah.
But Rocco, we got to take a break for some messages. We're going to be back in 2 minutes with Rocco Rossi, the CEO of a new organization called Shift 25. We're going to delve into exactly what they are, what he's doing, and how he's going to help us dream bigger in just 2 minutes. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. It's really fun for me tonight to chat with Rocco Rossi, who's a gentleman that, probably needs no introduction in the Greater Toronto Area or Canada. He's been involved in so many different things, but he's really quite inspirational in a lot of the roles he's played, because he's had a huge impact on our community. He started out as a consultant with Boston Consulting Group. He spent some time with Toronto Star and a software company, board of director of the United Way, but then he became CEO of the Heart and Stroke Foundation. And then he became really notable when he ran for mayor in Toronto in 2010, about 14 years ago. And I think really had quite an impact on that campaign, and everyone got to know Rocco Rossi and a lot of the policies and issues that you came forward with at the time. You then worked with prostate cancer. You were the president and CEO of prostate cancer for 5 years, president and CEO of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce for 6 years, and now you've joined Shift 25. Rocco, that's quite the career.
Well, it's just proof positive that I can't hold a job, I think is what you're underscoring there. But no, I've been
Heart
super
and Stroke,
fortunate.
Prostate Canada, Chamber of Commerce. Pretty impressive.
Look at, I'm the kid who woke up at third base, hit a bunt, and gets credited for a home run. But really, it's all about my parents who sacrificed, who made some of those opportunities, my mentors, my teachers, colleagues. And so as with all successful people, it's never just one person. And it's part of what drives me in Shift 25 is how do we ensure that I'm not just a lottery winner,
Right.
but that the game is set in such a way that the vast majority of people can participate and build that better life. And you were asking, how do you help people to dream bigger? One of the programs that Shift 25 had set up even before me joining is an incredible unit of curriculum in our high schools, in over 4,000 schools across Canada from 9 to 12, that focus on the theme of how to reframe the concept of failure. Because unfortunately, too
Reframe the
often,
concept of failure?
of failure,
Really?
that very often we're taught of failure as a source of shame, that if you try something and it doesn't work out, that this is a bad thing. I mean, the best example of this is actually within The Simpsons, and Homer very famously one day says, trying is the first step towards failing. Well, we don't want that attitude. We want an attitude that says, actually, failure is an opportunity to learn and to grow. Because my dad keeps reminding me that success is the worst teacher, because then you assume you know everything and you don't grow, you don't stretch yourself, you don't seek to get better. But when you get knocked down, as long as you see it as an opportunity to pick yourself back up again, to learn from what led to that result, and to turn it into something positive. That's what feeds great entrepreneurs. It's what feeds great community leaders. I mean, in the not-for-profit sector, the number of times when you go out and you ask people to participate in a cause or make a donation, and that they're getting so many requests so that they have to say no. If you just take that failure, if you will, and let it stop you, then you're of no use to the cause. You're of no use to succeeding and putting that agenda forward. And we want that same kind of attitude. We want to encourage that same kind of attitude for Canada, to dream big. And you know what? If you don't fail in life, you probably have not dreamed big enough,
Well, no question.
and you're
So
not learning enough.
is Shift 25 therefore primarily an educational entity?
There's a big chunk of the work that is on education, because we feel it's a long-term cultural shift, if you will. But we'll also be launching a media campaign. We'll be looking at other educational units. We're not, this is something where you need to create a movement in the same way that, kids came home from school those many years ago to say, you know what, we have to recycle. That wasn't driven by adults. At the end of the day, it was driven by young people. And we believe as well that this drive towards a more vibrant, more innovative, more aspirational Canada, that spark needs to be lit from our young people on up, because they actually start. You have to grind someone down. The real dreams, the real open mindedness starts when you're younger, and we want to feed those dreams going forward.
I spent some time with Len Wasserman. He's the former dean
Yeah.
of the DeGroote School of Business at McMaster University, I think 2 weeks ago. And he was saying that we have a real innovation problem, a lack of a prosperity growth agenda in Canada. And he said that, we don't have enough people that are interested in innovation, interested in coming up with something new. And then when there are those people, we don't have the people that are willing to invest in them. And he complained about our educational system. He complained about our tax system. He complained about the lack of ecosystems. It went on and on. Where do you start?
Well, again, that's why we believe we started with this educational curriculum, which is important. But I think we also need to be celebrating. I mean, within the U.S., there is very much a culture of celebrating success, as opposed to feeling more of the tall poppy syndrome that we get. It's absolutely important and wonderful as a part of the Canadian character, that we want our communities lifted, but that doesn't mean that success is a zero sum for the rest. It's in fact by encouraging and celebrating success that we raise up the entire community. And that's part of the message as well, is not simply that education on innovation, as Len speaks about, but it's also ensuring that those who are aspiring see that and are celebrated as incredible role models for our young people.
You talk about how real disposable median income hasn't grown in 15 years, may actually have declined. The only growth in GDP has been because of the growth in the population. Productivity, I think the statistics say was equivalent to the United States about 4 or 5 years ago, and today is 30% less than the United States. I saw a
Not 4 or
report
5 years ago, it was back in the 90s, but the point is still very, very well taken. We're down closing in on 2/3.
And I think the statistic that I saw of where Ontario stands versus median disposable income or GDP per capita versus the United States was that we were actually equal to the sixth worst. And I think it was Alabama or something like that. And so, it wasn't that we were equal to, and you mentioned 30% less or 33% less than the states bordering the Great Lakes that really are closest neighbors, but they were comparable to some of those southern states that, frankly, I wouldn't have thought we would have thought of being our equals. But that is where we are. So I got to ask you the question: how'd we get here?
Well, it's a long process. There wasn't just one element. I mean, part of it is, again, we have been very, very fortunate and have taken a number of things for granted. And over the years, that was okay because it would be made up for the fact that we had such a small population and we were able to sell resources, primary goods, and then get into a very powerful and successful free trade agreement with the United States, starting with the auto industry, which was a big driver of economic growth. But we've been resting a little bit, if you will, on our laurels, and the rest of the world has become far more competitive. And so some of it is decisions we've made, and some of it is simply relative to what is happening in the rest of the world. And we need a bit of a wake-up call. You've had the deputy governor of the Bank of Canada call this a sort of a break glass emergency on productivity, because look, sometimes when people hear the word productivity, they think, well, it's just you fat cats are telling us that we need to work harder. No, part of this is business needs to be investing more in machines and software to allow everyone to be working smarter, not harder, to be able to get more input for every hour of labor that goes into the economy. That ultimately is productivity, but we're not doing productivity for the sake of productivity. Increased productivity means you can then spend more on hospitals, you can spend more on roads, you can spend more on schools. And without that, you have a diminishing economy, and then you get into zero-sum economics, which no one wants to get to, because that's a situation where you lose social cohesion, where you're no longer able to offer opportunities to your young people, where you're no longer able to take care of a rapidly aging population the way all of us want to.
Okay, but Rocco, you said we've been resting on our laurels, and I can accept that, and some people call it a Dutch disease or whatever it is, that because we had, the benefit of our natural resources, we got tax revenue that we otherwise might not have enjoyed. We got great opportunities for high-paying jobs in the oil industry in Newfoundland and Western Canada. Yeah, maybe, but okay, still. What do we do? How do we get out of it? Lots of people have had times where they've rested on their laurels, and yet, are we going to be stuck with that situation forever? How do you said the deputy governor of the Bank of Canada, she said that this is an emergency situation, as you say, and she complained about red tape, she complained about regulation, she complained about the lack of productivity, she complained about innovation, but she didn't have a lot of prescription as to how we get out of it. How do we solve it?
Well, and as you know, the Bank of Canada's mandate is not to involve itself in politics. It's to focus on monetary policy. But for the rest of us, we can focus on the issue of regulatory environment. The fact that we still have interprovincial barriers decades after we've said this is nonsensical. Maybe in the past that was okay. That didn't harm us too much. But in a more competitive world, we simply can't afford to take what is a relatively small economy vis-a-vis the rest of the world. We're about 2% of global GDP, and make ourselves smaller by having economic barriers and trade barriers within Canada that in some instances are greater than trading between Canada and other countries. I mean, that's nonsensical. We also want to have taxation policy, obviously, that is stimulating more risk taking, but it's also ambition, it's also dream, it's also in the same way that, as I said, we built that campaign around owning the podium and had tremendous results in growing sports programs. We need to have that same ambition, and more so when it comes to our economy, when it comes to starting new businesses and seeing the opportunities, for instance, available in trades. We for so long we're telling our kids through elementary and high school that university is the only path, and now we have a circumstance where skilled trades are aging out, and we have incredible needs, whether it's housing, whether it's infrastructure, advanced projects where, quite frankly, electricians, welders, boiler makers are in incredible demand and really necessary, and can lead to the kinds of incomes to provide themselves and their families with really good lifestyles, and with the opportunity and ability to then go and buy a home.
So let's talk about your own the podium attitude, because I love that description, that analogy. One of the things about On the Podium was that they picked potential winners and put a lot of money behind potential winners. Does Canada have the attitude that we can and are prepared to pick some potential winners and put some big money behind them?
Well, we certainly are doing that. You're seeing the provincial and federal governments in the EV battery world where they're starting that. I'm sort of much more predisposed to thinking about encouraging the innovation ecosystem as a whole, because you never know where the next really great idea is going to come from. And so having an economy that is encouraging and rewarding risk-taking more, innovation more, will generally lead to greater results. And we're seeing other countries around the world that are ahead of us in terms of innovation, spending much more of their GDP on R&D, much more on research through their universities and through their economies in their businesses. It's not that we don't have champions within different sectors, but on average, we're not doing as well, and in fact, we're coming towards the tail end of the OECD over the last several years, and looking forward for the next several years.
I think we got some challenges. I think your own the podium attitude is inspirational and potentially a great descriptor of what we need to do from an attitudinal standpoint in regards to innovation and productivity and business investment.
And the difference being that Own the Podium was ultimately about national pride, whereas owning the podium when it comes to the economy is about providing us with the wherewithal to then continue to invest in and build and support the society that we want. So it's not simply, we're not doing this just to be able to beat our breasts and say, wow, aren't we great and we're number one. No, it's we can better take care of our seniors. We can do a better job in continuing to be a beacon for refugees and immigrants from around the world. We can continue to contribute to the efforts to make the world a better place. We can invest more in greening the economy. You can't do any of those things in a declining economy.
We're going to take a break for some messages and come back in 2 minutes with Rocco Rossi, the president and CEO of a new organization called Shift 25, and delve even further into this issue of how do we increase our productivity, our prosperity, our gross disposable income per person in Canada. Let's be frank about it, how we can become more prosperous. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is Rocco Rossi, who has just come back from a big trip across Spain on a big trek as he's gone through his spiritual enlightenment phase, getting ready for his new job. I love it. I actually went to a talk once, Rocco, where someone said you should always keep some hiking boots ready and a map ready with a trek laid out, so if you lose a job or you get divorced, you have a problem, or you just need some thinking time, that you can take off and do that trek. So you're inspirational to me. I've got my boots. My boots are made for walking and they're ready to go. I got to ask you though, I'm struggling trying to figure out why we've gotten to this situation. And there's a lot of different sort of opinions and data points in this regard. There was a book by a former minister of finance that said that we don't have a growth agenda. And part of the reason why is that our federal government is more redistributive oriented rather than thinking about productivity, innovation, prosperity, et cetera, which is sort of, counter to what you said, that, that some people, he would suggest, actually think you can get all those things by just redistributing the pie versus what you're talking about, which is effectively growing the pie. There was a really interesting, big article in the Globe and Mail. I think it was about a year ago right now. I remember reading that said that the problem is in our cabinet today, there's really only career politicians. And in the past, we've always had this combination of some people that have been really good retail politicians and understand politics really well, but also people that understand business, whether they be from Bay Street or Main Street, but they understand business. And they use the example of, Paul Martin and Jean Chrétien, or Jim Flaherty and Stephen Harper, go back through, so many examples, Trudeau and Turner. And that one of the negatives today is there isn't a senior person in our cabinet and or in the official opposition potentially that is a business person that understands business real well. and went even back to the success during World War II with C.D. Howe and the dollar a year men that came to Ottawa with business expertise to really help the war effort. I had a really interesting interview with a former principal secretary and head of the Privy Council in 2 different provinces, and then also in the federal government, who said the problem was that civil servants are policy oriented, but not implementation oriented. And what you needed to do, he said, is have a COO in each one of the main ministries that would actually be charged with getting things done, because we have a lack of an attitude toward getting things done. So all these different opinions, all these data points. If you were in charge, Rocco, what do we do to achieve this desire that you've got, this objective you've got of having an own the podium in regards to, and I'll give you one other data point. I've heard people say these superclusters that the federal government is investing in are incredibly successful. And we've got great development of IT and high tech in Waterloo, and fisheries in Atlantic Canada, and resources out west. And then other people say governments can't pick winners, and that's just a waste of money. So what's your prognosis, sir?
Well, first of all, I don't think we can put it all at the feet of government, nor do I believe that the answer is simply at the feet of government. This is going to require a true Team Canada approach. It's in our schools, but it's in our families as well. It's about encouraging more potentially non-traditional dreams. It is about encouraging innovation and risk-taking to create that kind of environment. It's for those who would say, well, if the government would simply change tax policy, that's going to unleash everything. Those are all pieces that are important, and regulation is an enormous one. I mean, we're making these massive investments into EV battery plants, and one of the rationale that gave those decision makers the motivation to invest there as opposed to somewhere else was that we have all of these critical minerals in the ground in Canada, which should give us a long-term sustainable competitive advantage after you get these plants up and running, because what you don't want is to be in a business where you have to be cutting checks ad infinitum to keep companies here. You want them to start here. You want to build that ecosystem, but you better have long-term economic advantage, competitive advantage to keep them here. And one of those competitive advantages for Canada is that we are blessed with incredible resources. The green transition is going to require an awful lot of mining. And unfortunately, today, to permit a new mine takes on average well over 15 years. And so if you're talking, for instance, in dealing with the climate crisis and greening the economy as quickly as possible to get to electrification, well, guess what? We're going to need an awful lot more copper. We're going to need rare earths. We're going to need lithium. And these things are in the ground, and that's going to require roads, mines, electrical grids. And that's not just government, that's the communities that will be affected in each of these areas. We can't afford to be NIMBYs. We have to look to be an action-oriented country if we're going to compete with the rest of the world, and if we're going to accomplish the things that we've set ourselves out to. And it's not just government that's on the hook for this.
I want to read you something that the Canadian Federation of Independent Business just came out with recently. They said 2/3 of Canadian small businesses cite tax and regulatory costs as their top cost constraints, hindering their ability to invest and expand. To put it simply, Canada is pushing a shopping cart forward with 2 broken wheels, leaving Canadians struggling to keep pace with our international counterparts. In addition, property taxes and payroll taxes are stifling growth. What do you think?
There's no question that tax policy is part of what we need to do, but the reality is we've been in times in our history when we've had lower taxes, and you still have not seen the level of investment in R&D that would be necessary to be world leading. So
Business
again, if there
investment.
was simply
Business
if there was
investment.
simply one lever, that would be really easy to do, and it would be easy to get consensus. And the problem is that the data does not show that there is a single lever on this question.
Business capital investment is one of the lowest in the G7. You identified R&D, but just not even R&D, just capital investment to improve
Right.
productivity.
And there have been times when our business taxes relative to our major competitors have actually been lower, and we've not seen an attitude towards investing sufficiently. It's been used to do share buybacks or to dividend out to investors, and so part of that is that necessary ambition, that desire to grow, to be world players, and not simply content to be the big fish in the relatively small pond of Canada.
So what do we do? We've talked about this attitude of on the podium. I think that we need more of a prosperity agenda. You're talking about
100%.
education, that we need to, educate people that failure isn't a disaster. It's something where you actually learn. I don't know if you are aware, but I actually am struggling through my doctorate in business, and my topic is economic development and entrepreneurship. And it's interesting. One of the things that exists in the most innovative economies is very strong social capital. It's an ecosystem. It's where people interact on a fairly regular basis. And it's, one of the old Austrian economists called about it, something in the air, the synchronicity in the air. And we don't have it that well in Canada. We don't have those ecosystems. How do you create the environment for people to be innovative, productive, and create prosperity?
I agree with you that a prosperity agenda that looks at investments in the social capital that you've talked about into our schools, into our universities, to have taxation and regulatory policy that's there to encourage innovation, reward innovation, not punish it, is crucial to growth, and is part of a prosperity agenda to raise people's sights and ambitions. I just think of, it's anecdotal, but I think of colleagues I had in college in the US versus colleagues I had in college in Canada, and just different size dreams when it came to business. And one who would be, if they got the business to $10-20 million, would be delighted. I'll sell that. I'll have my cottage. I'll have my skidoo. I'll have all that I want. And those colleagues in the US know I'm interested in building $1 billion company, not just to have more money, but to have the aspiration to be a global leader, to have the aspiration to go out there and compete against the best of the best. And when that happens, in the same way as you compete for the podium spot in the Olympics, great things happen for the society around, because you then have the resources to double down on the investments in the social capital.
Rocco, let me ask you one last question, if I could, because you've got this
Please.
interesting intersection between business and politics and the not-for-profit, but the not-for-profit both with a social attitude as well as a business orientation, given your Chamber of Commerce and now this current organization that you're part of.
I've always been a believer that not-for-profit is not the right term. That is the for impact sector.
Okay, I apologize.
Right?
The for
Like
impact sector.
Our
So let me ask you
goal
about For
is,
Impact then. I
yeah,
interviewed someone yesterday that said the challenge that he thought existed in Canada today, and he was specifically talking about the Greater Toronto Area, frankly. He
yeah,
said is that we've got a broken municipal democracy, and the proof of that is incredibly low voter turnout, that people just don't think their vote counts, that City Hall doesn't care, or the city halls don't care, and so therefore it's not worth going out to actually try to make a difference. And he says that's also because social trust has eroded, and we desperately need to rebuild it. What do you think of those two statements? Do we have a broken municipal democracy, and has social trust eroded?
it is hard not to take seriously the very low voter turnouts, and you're seeing decreasing voter turnout at all levels of government, but clearly at municipal, it is by far the lowest, and that is a combination of sense of being able to make a difference, sense of trust. And so it's important. We need to be reflecting on that, and we need to be giving people proof points as to, yes, it is making a difference. And it does. I'm a big believer, and as someone who's dabbled in politics and put my name forward a couple of times unsuccessfully, I am an enormous believer that the vast majority of those who are getting involved at all levels are there to make a difference, are there genuinely committed to doing the best that they can. So I want to support those efforts very much. And again, it's why I say we can't just leave it or think this is something that government is going to solve. We can do that. We can contribute to that in our communities. And secondly, unfortunately, we've also had the rise of social media, which has led to a sort of a further exacerbation of that really polarity in discussions, and the amping up of rage and mistrust and the rest, which has not been healthy for society. And all the more reason for us to get involved, not just politically, but in efforts like Shift 25 or other community efforts that are ongoing. Because to leave it with one hopeful thought, again, it comes back to Churchill's wonderful line, which is, democracy is the worst form of government except for all of the rest. I still wouldn't trade it for what other people are living under in other jurisdictions, because I value my freedom, I value my sense of choice, and I am at heart an optimist who believes that we have all of these incredible ingredients, and all it takes is a slight shift in attitude and size of dream, and we will create the society that we want.
Well, and wasn't it Teddy Roosevelt that said something like, "It's better to be, dusty and worn
The
out in the
man in
middle
the
of the
arena,
arena
yeah,
than to have never entered
100%,
the arena at all."
100%. And
Rocco
so,
Rossi, thanks very much for your inspiration, and good luck with this new organization. If people want to follow you and see what Shift 25 is all about, how do they best do that, sir?
shift25.ca is the website, and they can also follow us on Facebook, on Twitter and Instagram, and we hope to be laying out more and more work over the next weeks and months to come.
Rocco Rossi, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. I'm going to take a break for 2 minutes and come back with some of my own concluding comments on the need for a prosperity agenda, a growth agenda, in just 2 minutes. Stay with us, everyone. Thank you, Rocco.